Hello, my name is Annemarie Wijmans and I am an astronomer at the University of St. Andrews. I would like to tell you a bit more about the musical universe. I, for a number of years now, have been given astronomy workshops in primary schools, and very often for those workshops I work together with my colleague Alan Thompson from the Laidlaw Music Center. And we deliver these interdisciplinary music astronomy workshops because we want to make sure that all pupils in the classroom find a way to engage with the workshop that we are presenting. So for instance, a pupil may not be very interested in astronomy and maybe struggle a little bit to connect with the subject. But if they are instead very interested in music, then that is another way for them to approach that subject. And the same goes for children who maybe are not very interested in music, but are very interested in astronomy or science. And these workshops have always been seen as very positive by pupils and teachers, but we did start to wonder, do these workshops actually make a difference in the longer term in the classroom? What happens when we leave the classroom? So we got another colleague involved, Paula Miles, who is in the School of the School of Psychology and Neuroscience. And she is an expert in educational research. And we decided that we were going to do a research project here. What we wanted to know is the impact, if any, of our interdisciplinary music astronomy workshops on the pupils and on the teachers. And we split it out in these two groups. So we were interested in changes in classroom environment. So how did the pupils react to the workshops? Would we see an increase in their confidence, in their skills, whether that is with collaboration, working in groups, or their knowledge about astronomy or music? But we were also interested in any impacts that could be had on the teachers themselves. These are primary school teachers. They are not necessarily experts in music or science. So would these workshops help them with their confidence and their enthusiasm in their teaching of music and science, and help them with developing new activities? So after we identified these research questions, we got through the ethics approval process at the university, and we selected our schools to work with. And we decided that we were going to work with 3 different classrooms and deliver 3 workshops in each of these classrooms. The schools are located in Scotland. We aimed for primary school 5, which is in Scotland 9 to 10-year-olds. And the outcome of the workshop for the pupils was to have a musical composition that they wrote themselves based on astronomy. And we would measure our impact by pupil questionnaires that they would fill in at the end of the 3rd and final workshop, and by teacher interviews. And we were specifically keen on these teacher interviews because teachers know their classroom very well. They know what is going on. They know their pupils. So any impact on the pupils or in the classroom would be something that they would hopefully notice. So we interviewed them before the first workshop, after the final workshop, and then 3 months later to see if anything happens in the longer term. When we developed our school workshops, we were also very keen to align with the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence, which tells what needs to be taught in Scottish schools. And for me, for the astronomy, 3 workshops in my head made immediate sense as the solar system, and then leaving the solar systems and going to stars, which is slightly outside of the curriculum, but still something that students would interact with. And then the final workshop on galaxies. And for Ellen, who took the musical part of the workshops, she was very interested to make sure that the pupils would get the structure of a musical composition, so the ABA structure, that they would get to grips with rhythms, with melodies, and that they would also be confident with taking an idea, in this case from astronomy, and develop that into a musical representation. So we structured the workshops as follows. We would start with a 30-minute interactive lecture on the astronomy topic. So that was solar systems for the first one, stars for the second, and galaxies for the third. And then we would split the class in half. half of them would come with me to do a bit more astronomy in the form of a Q&A. And the other half would be divided in groups and start working on a musical composition. And we did that because when the pupils work in groups on their music, first of all, there is a bit of a noise level, let's be honest, but also they needed a bit of guidance there. It was not something that they were necessarily familiar with writing a musical composition. And if we had fewer groups there, that meant that Ellen and the teacher could provide more assistance. And we also had some students with us from the university to help with that part. And in the final workshop, although the pupils did get this workshop about galaxies, that was not actually developed in any new ideas. They had their planets, stars, planets as their ABA. So they rehearsed the piece, they made recordings, and they did a performance for the class. And just to give a little bit of an idea about what that musical composition work looked like, here is the workshop that Ellen Thompson developed for that. So this was after the first workshop, section A, where they had to pick a planet in their group, come up with some things they learned about that planet, put that into a sentence, develop a rhythm for that sentence, and get a melody and also a counter melody there. So some of the immediate outcomes of this. So this is based on our own observations as the people who delivered the workshop and on the pupil questionnaires. And what we found was, first of all, some very positive reactions from the pupils and teachers. And that was not just saying, hey, this was fun, but we also noticed how engaged the pupils were, both during the astronomy lectures and during the group work that we did with them. We also in the questionnaires found that, and I find this really interesting, and I really want to dive into this a little bit more when we do more analysis on this, is that some pupils showed a very strong preference for either music or astronomy. And that is interesting, whether that is something they came with into the workshops or whether that is something that developed during the workshops, but it does show that having that interdisciplinary approach means that at least they can engage with the parts that they are actually very interested in. And also some lesson learned for us as the people delivering the workshops. For me, as from the astronomy part, I think we were at the right level with the astronomy topics. I based that on the questions that I got. Some of them were actually really, really good and showed they were thinking things through. I did notice, however, that when talking about galaxies, that is very far out of the curriculum and just something students or pupils at that age are less familiar with. So they were fascinated, but they grappled with some of the concepts. We also noticed that the group work can be a bit loud and overwhelming, and having student assistance there is actually really, really crucial to make sure that all the pupils could do their best work in their group. Now, some of the longer term outcomes, and this is based on the teachers' interviews, and this is something that we're still analyzing, but some of the things that we already got out of the interviews is, first of all, and I was so glad to actually get this out, that the teachers did report that they got a new perspective on delivering new content and that they were keen to try out this idea of using music to enforce some of the ideas of a new topic that they're introducing, whether that is astronomy or something else. I was also pleased to hear that there was a new perspective of music with one of the teachers reporting that they no longer saw music as just noise, and they had brought the musical instruments into the classroom as something to use regularly instead of something that you just lock into a cabinet. The teachers also reported that the pupils were still talking about the astronomy that they learned, also outside of the classroom settings. They didn't report an increase in group work, but they also said that their pupils already were very used and very well skilled in working in groups. So if they already are skilled, there's maybe not much to gain there. But what I also really like to see was the teachers reported an increase in their own confidence in either music or science. In the first interview, they had identified with what they saw as weaker areas in their in their knowledge, whether that was music or science, and they did report that they now felt better equipped, having seen our workshop, to try something similar. So in conclusion, I think that interdisciplinary music and astronomy workshops can have a long-term impact. They are seen as very positive. They increase teachers' confidence in experimenting with delivery methods, and they also show that the pupils retain their knowledge. Although I will say there, it's not completely clear at this point whether that is because the music really reinforced what they learned about the astronomy, or whether if they had just done astronomy workshops that we would have that same retain of knowledge. That is something we need to investigate further. We do hope to do another interview with the teachers later this year to see if any of the plans they had of doing this interdisciplinary approach in their own classroom has paid off. And then we're also looking forward to see what we can do next to expand this project to other schools and communities. Thank you very much for listening.